Drewsguitarshop in Seattle, Washington, and that is about the extent of the bass playing that I do, because I'm not a bass player. I'm more of a banjo, guitar, and mandolin person. But anyway, I'm here to talk to you about this Ibanez Mikro bass 5-string that I am selling here in the shop on consignment for a longtime customer. This is a very, very cool instrument. This hasn't quite seen as much modification as the other two basses that I'm selling for this client, but it still is a very, very solid instrument. Getting into it, this has a graphite nut, just stock, which is pretty good. As far as like the artificial materials that you can make a nut out of, graphite is probably, pretty good for electrics, just because it's got that factor of kind of self-lubrication where it allows the strings to kind of slip in and out and doesn't cause tuning problems. So I think that that's a pretty good choice for this bass. I've gone through and checked out all the frets. There's no fret issues. I haven't reworked these because I didn't need to, but I always look for that on instruments that I'm selling here. As far as the wood goes on this guy, basically got a Indian rosewood fretboard with a rock maple neck with an angle back headstock using a scarf joint. Very, very cool stuff. I like the fact that it's got the angle back to put more pressure down on the nut, and I also like the fact that it's a scarf joint, meaning that that's, way stronger than it needs to be being made out of maple. This is going to be these are hard headstocks to snap off, which I like because I don't like getting those jobs in. Not because I don't like doing the work, it's just very sad. Anyway, getting back down to the body. The body is probably either poplar or it's basswood. I'm not exactly sure which. I've only had the neck off of one of these basses, and I'm not sure that they use the same wood for each one. But the one that I pulled off, it was either one of those two, which is actually kind of nice because one of the things that I like about this bass, on top of being small, is it's also very, very light. I actually just really like lighter instruments just because, if you're going to be standing for a while playing on a thing, it's so much nicer when it's not like, kind of messing up your upper back, lower back, and neck and putting a lot of strain on you. Something that's light is just nice to have. The scale on this bass is about 28.5 inches, which is somewhere in between like the kind of long Fender scale that you would see on like a Strat, so 25.5, and a baritone guitar, which typically tend to run around 30 inches or so. And so this is actually kind of shorter than a lot of baritone guitars, which is interesting and also kind of cool. It means that this thing is very short scale for a bass. It's just super compact and tiny and nice. I really like short scale basses, and these are about as short as it gets. They're just extremely comfortable to play, and just like, the ergonomics on it is wonderful. Getting down into the electronics, we have, like all the micro basses that have been in here so far, it's got two volume controls, one for each pickup. Meaning that you can blend the pickups just kind of however much you want of one or the other, like going 50% on this one, going 70% on this one. You can do that on this. If that's the exact tone you want, you can really dial that in, which is super cool. It's kind of got that advantage over, say, just having a normal selector switch where you're like full on, or full on. Because you can do that blending and get kind of like some interesting tones to it. You have a master tone that acts as a low pass filter, just like, tone knob on a guitar. You turn it up, the highs come down, and you get more perception of more bass. The bridge is the standard bridge. I did have to modify it a little bit, which I talked about in another video, because this bridge was not intonating where it was placed. And I haven't had that issue on the other two micro basses that I've sold here, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there, that I did actually have to shave the screws down on this quite a lot to get this to intonate. But it has been set up and it has been intonated. So, the nut, the neck, and the pickup height and the radius and string height and all of that has been dialed in. It plays extremely comfortably. It's just very, very nice. We do have to raise the action very little bit, above what we would normally do on these shorter scale instruments, just because the strings tend to be a little bit more floppy on these shorter scales. But that being said, I was able to really get some nice action out of this, and I think that that's partially due to the fact that this is strung with flat wounds, which tend to have a bit of a thicker core. And so, these strings are pulling really nice where they're at, and they feel really good. And that said, the slightly higher action isn't really noticeable on these shorter scale instruments, just because, again, the strings tend to be a little bit more floppy. It doesn't tend to be perceived by the player as making it harder to play. It's just like, it's compensated for by the fact that the strings are just kind of looser. As far as anything else that I can say about this, these come with pretty nice tuners. The pickups in these are actually pretty nice. The bridge, aside from my one complaint about it, which is that I really wish that the intonation screws went all the way in, all the way through it, because that would have prevented the need for what I had to do to the screws to shorten them. But other than that, it's great. Really, really solid. And the condition of this instrument is absolutely fantastic. There's a little bit of evidence down here that, some fingers have been playing on it, but you could take it to a buffing wheel and make that stuff completely disappear in a matter of seconds. Going on the back, there's no rash. There's none of the little nicks and dings and things. This customer keeps things in very, very good condition, and it's just kind of a joy, seeing these things that I know have been in his possession for years, and that have been treated extremely well, obviously, by just how good they look. So this is essentially in mint condition. I mean, this is almost like right off the wall at Guitar Center or wherever. So very, very cool instrument. Anyway, this has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington, showing off this micro bass. If you're interested in buying it, there's a link in the description that's going to go to a reverb ad for it. If that reverb ad goes to an active listing, this bass is still for sale. If that listing is no longer active, this bass is sold, but you may want to check out some of the other stuff that I have on that reverb page. Also, if you found this video entertaining or helpful, consider dropping me a tip in my Ko-Fi or my Patreon, which are also linked down below. Also, feel free to check out my website, link down there, that has my contact information, my pricing information, as well as a page that I wrote on, kind of telling players a little bit, giving some helpful tips and tricks on caring for stringed instruments. Recently, also, I added a page on basically everything you could want to know about fretwork, going fretless, anything you can think of related to the fingerboard on an instrument that is normally fretted. Talks all about wire, talks all about compound radius, different sorts of different sorts of materials that we see in fret wire these days, also the little section in it on going fretless, especially for you bass players. That's kind of a cool thing. Just as a kind of a quick aside, because I forgot to mention this in the rest of the video, if you're a parent and you are looking for an instrument for a young kid that wants to play bass, this is probably more along the lines of what you want to be looking at. I used to teach guitar, and one of the things that used to drive me nuts was that I'd get parents in, or I get kids in who were in their single digits, and they would come in with a full-size Strat, and you'd see this kid kind of reaching up there to get to first position. It's no good. Kids will of course grow into bigger instruments, but if you want them to learn proper technique and really get a lot of joy out of playing, it's much better to just give them an instrument right off the bat that's kind of sized to them. And then, when they grow out of it, you sell that instrument and get a bigger one. And, by the time they're ready for that bigger one, maybe they're, ready to get something kind of nice. So, just keep that in mind. This is a pretty short scale instrument, and for basses that's kind of a big deal, because I'm 5'7", and even I have kind of a hard time ergonomically with some longer scale basses. They're just kind of uncomfortable for me to play. There's a reason why you see all these bass players on stage, and they're always the guys that are like 6 something, you know. Just happens to be the kind of person that ends up sticking with it. So, you know, do with that information what you will. Anyway, most of this channel is dedicated to tips and tricks for players, luthier-related stuff. So if that's your bag, check out everything you know, in my videos on my channel, and you know, please enjoy them. This has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. Thank you for watching.